For 13 years, the Port of Seattle held a hostage. It wasn't a political prisoner or a shipment of contraband. It was a silver-painted sculpture of Kevlar, aluminum, and magnesium. Porsche 959, chassis number 001. To the longshoremen, it was just a dusty wedge taking up space. To the United States Department of Transportation, it was a biological weapon aimed at the heart of American protectionist law. Most people tell you the 25-year rule exists to keep you safe from uncrash-tested foreign junk. That is a lie manufactured in a boardroom in Stuttgart and enforced by lobbyists in D.C. By 1985, the gray market was booming. 60,000 cars a year were bypassing official dealerships. Mercedes-Benz North America was losing $300 million in annual revenue. Because Americans realized they could buy a 500 SEL in Munich, ship it to Baltimore, and save $30,000, even after the conversion costs. So, they did what any failing monopoly does. They lobbied. The result was the Imported Vehicle Safety Compliance Act of 1988. This wasn't a safety bill, it was a federal blockade. It effectively ended the era of the individual importer. And when Bill Gates tried to bring his 959 through the gate in 1987, he didn't just find a no-entry sign. He found himself in the crosshairs of a government determined to make an example out of the elite. Illegally importing this car carried a penalty of 5 years in federal prison and a $250,000 fine. The world's richest man had finally found something he couldn't buy his way out of. He was stuck in a 13-year standoff with a bureaucracy that didn't care about his net worth. Why couldn't Porsche just crash test the 959? The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration demanded 4 cars for destruction. 4. In 1987, the 959 cost Porsche $500,000 to build, but they sold them for $225,000 just to satisfy FIA Group B homologation rules. Porsche was already bleeding cash on every unit. They looked at the US market requirements and realized that giving 4 cars to the government to be turned into scrap metal was a $2 million write-off they didn't need. They simply said no. As an engineer, looking at the 959 is like looking at an alien artifact dropped in the middle of a tractor factory. It featured a 2.85-liter flat 6 with water-cooled heads and air-cooled cylinders, a direct technical descendant of the 962 Le Mans winner. It had sequential twin turbochargers before most American cars had even mastered basic fuel injection. It used a 6-speed manual transmission with a Gelände gear for off-roading, and a Porsche Steuer Kupplung, or PSK all-wheel drive system that could dynamically shift up to 80% of the torque to the rear wheels under heavy acceleration. The 959 also featured hollow-spoke magnesium wheels, the first of their kind on a production car. These weren't just for weight reduction. They formed a sealed chamber with the tire, equipped with a built-in Reifendruck control, or RDK tire pressure monitoring system. In 1986, this was science fiction. The DOT's computers literally couldn't process it. Their spreadsheets for federalization required specific bumper heights and side impact beams that would have required cutting into the 959's Kevlar aramid skin and Nomex floor panels. To the bureaucrats, if it didn't fit the 49 CFR Part 571 standards, it wasn't a car. It was an unidentified rolling object. And so, Gates's car sat, racking up $28 a day in storage fees, 4,745 days of silence in a humid Seattle foreign trade zone. Imagine the atmospheric tension. While Microsoft was launching Windows 95 and changing the digital architecture of the planet, Gates' physical masterpiece, the pinnacle of analog-digital hybrid engineering, was rotting in a shipping container. If you think about it like a video game, the 959 was a glitched item in the American server. Like a restricted weapon in a game like Cyberpunk 2077 or Red Dead Redemption 2 that you haven't leveled up enough to use, the car existed in physical space but was digitally and legally locked by a federal firewall. It was a $225,000 paperweight. But Gates wasn't alone. He had Paul Allen, he had Jerry Seinfeld, and most importantly, he had Bruce Canepa. Canepa is the special ops commander of the automotive world, part racing driver, part forensic engineer. He realized that fighting the DOT with logic was a losing game. You had to fight them with their own weapon, legislation. Gates and Canepa hired Warren Dean, a powerhouse attorney from Thompson Coburn, who had previously served as Assistant General Counsel for International Law at the DOT. This wasn't a coincidence. They needed someone who knew where the skeletons were buried in the federal code. Together, they drafted what would become the Show or Display Amendment to 49 CFR, Part 591. This was the Trojan horse. They didn't argue that the car was safe. They argued that the car was significant. They created a new legal category for machines of extraordinary technological or historical significance, where the production run was fewer than 500 units. In 1999, after a decade of legal siege, the wall finally crumbled. President Clinton signed the amendment. But the DOT had one last middle finger for the billionaires. The car could only be driven 2,500 miles a year, and it still had to pass contemporary emissions. This presented a final, almost insurmountable hurdle. The 959's Bosch Motronic 2.1 engine management system was a black box from the mid-80s, designed for European 98-octane leaded fuel. By 1999, it had to pass California's OBD2 air sniff tests. This is where the investigative journalist meets the engineer. Canepa spent the next few years re-engineering the 959 for the 21st century. He didn't just fix the emissions, he performed a complete heart transplant. He replaced the 80s-era Garrett turbos with modern Borg-Warner ball-bearing units. He threw away the primitive wastegates and replaced them with parallel twin-turbo architecture. He rewrote the fuel mapping from scratch to run on 91-octane pump gas while meeting U.S. Tier 1 emission standards. In the book, The Machine That Changed the World by Womack and Jones, they talk about how Toyota's lean production destroyed the old guard's bloated manufacturing. Well, Canepa's engineering destroyed the 959's factory limitations. He took a 450 horsepower car and turned it into a 763 horsepower monster that ran cleaner than a modern Honda Civic. He upgraded the suspension from the complex, leak-prone hydraulic comfort system to a modernized version of the 959S coilover setup. He even worked with Michelin to develop new tire compounds that could handle the 763 horsepower output, because the original 1980s Bridgestone RE71s were essentially hockey pucks by the year 2000. When Gates finally took delivery of his car in 2001, it wasn't the same machine that was seized in 1987. It was faster, smarter, and legally untouchable. He didn't just win, he gained information. He proved that even the most rigid federal monopoly can be bypassed if you have enough information gain and the patience of a glacier. He had paid over $133,000 in storage fees alone, roughly half the original price of the car, just for the right to drive it home. The 959's 13-year imprisonment changed the landscape for every American enthusiast. Because of the show or display rule, the federal gates opened for the McLaren F1, the Nissan Skyline R34Z Tune, and the Mercedes CLK GTR. These cars weren't just imports anymore. They were recognized by the US government as the artifacts of human achievement. The fear the government had was that the gray market would destroy the safety of the American road. The reality? They were just protecting a cartel of dealerships who didn't want to compete with superior engineering. In David Halberstam's The Reckoning, he chronicles the slow, agonizing death of Detroit's ego, as they realized they couldn't stop the Japanese imports through quality alone, so they turned to the law. The 959 was the final, high-performance nail in that protectionist coffin. Next time you see a 25-year-old JDM Legend or a $1 million hypercar being offloaded at a port, remember chassis 001. Remember the $28 a day meter that ran for 4,745 days. Bill Gates didn't just buy a Porsche. He funded a decade-long war for your right to own a machine that the government deems too advanced for your own good. The Seattle warehouse is empty now. The dust has settled on the Kevlar fenders. But the law it broke? That's still on the books, a permanent scar on the face of automotive protectionism. And in 2026, as we face a new era of software-defined vehicles and federal kill switches, we might need to look back at the 959. We might need another Trojan horse. We might need to remember that the most dangerous thing you can bring into a stagnant system is a machine that refuses to follow the rules.